Hello, hello. Welcome to Writer's Bullpen, the show where we sit down with prominent and successful writers in the entertainment industry to talk about their craft and careers. My name is Christian Pensa, and I'm the manager of this fast food restaurant. For today's episode, we're wandering into some scary territory. Today's guest is an independent horror filmmaker. He wrote and directed an independent horror film that came out in 2020. It's called I Need You Dead, and it has a very unique aesthetic. It's very strange and bizarre. It taps into sort of alternative culture a lot. It's got a great punk soundtrack, and it's, a genuinely emotional movie. It's one that seriously gets to me, and it's told in this really fun, wacky sort of grotesque style that you kind of see in like trauma films, if you're familiar with trauma films, if you know what those are. Basically, a very fun, a very wacky horror movie on a very small budget. And the writer and director of it, his name is Rocko Zevenbergen. He was an incredible interview guest, very cool guy to have on the show. We talk about his writing process, the emotions that he puts into his stories, the independent, rebellious filmmaking style that he brings with him on all of his projects, the culture that inspires his work, and even what goes into some of the ghoulish creatures that he puts on the page and that end up on the screen. All right, well, I'm sitting here with a very prolific independent writer, director, and producer known for his work on The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. I fell in love with a Z-grade director in Brooklyn and his debut feature film, I Need You Dead. Rocko Zevenbergen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So can you tell us kind of what your typical screenwriting session looks like?
Well, just before we started, I was talking about how I frequent a lot of diners, and typically when I'm writing, basically, I would argue 99% of the time that I am working on a screenplay, I am sitting in a diner with a cup of coffee and a slice of cheesecake. And yeah, I usually just kind of hang out for, 2 or 3 hours. And, depending on, in terms of what the actual work of the writing process looks like, it really just depends on how far along into the script I am.
Yeah.
If it's a first draft, it's which I think is what most people think about when writing screenplays, that initial getting it all out. It's a lot of just letting my fingers fly and not really thinking too much about if what I'm writing is any good or if it's going to change the world or anything, but rather just like that it's coming out at all and that it feels natural and organic. And if it checks those two boxes, then I kind of just go.
How often are you writing without food? And do you think it suffers if you're not, physically fueled up?
Writing without food, I mean, that's funny. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because I really do need to have something. It doesn't necessarily have to be food. Certainly coffee has to be a part of the equation, or tea, or I have to have something that I can fiddle around with, while I'm writing, just to kind of balance the scales of my engine or whatever. Like I write a bunch of stuff and then savor a little bite of something. I don't know. It's just kind of like hitting refresh on your browser every time or something. It just keeps your mind clear.
Yeah, I get you. I'm kind of the same way. So where does a project typically start for you when you're writing? What's the first thing that you tend to put on paper?
Well, it really depends. A lot of times I will start with like an outline if the idea is pretty fully fleshed out already in my head. But if I just kind of have a premise for how something is going to start, then a lot of times I'll just kind of start from page one and let it ride. And then by the time you get to typing the words "the end," then it's about looking back and seeing what worked. But yeah, I mean, more often than not, getting started is really just letting words come out onto the page. I think a lot of people get really caught up in trying to perfect the things they want to say before they even hit the page, and it's so much easier to just vomit all over the pages and then go searching in that content for stuff that's good. rather than trying to do it before it even comes out, because before it even comes out, it's all dark inside your brain, so you can't see anything. You can't actually see if something's good or not, So you got to get it out into the light, and then you can chisel away at what actually looks good and what's garbage.
Yeah, absolutely. How did I Need You Dead start? Where did that start for you?
Well, I wanted to make a film. Well, it was my first feature, so it was kind of like something that had been, I had been obviously thinking about a long time. I've been wanting to make movies since I was like 8, so it was a long time coming, and I think I was starting to realize the more personal a story was, the better and easier in many ways it is to create something that feels like it means something. Mm. So at the time, around the time that I kind of conceived I Need You Dead, I was pretty depressed. And so I kind of was like, well, how can I write a story about, depression in the way that I'm experiencing it, but put it through the lens of, the films that I love. And so I think the kind of initial idea for it was to take my depression and kind of breed it with like Gremlins, with kind of like, it was like a cross section of Gremlins, my depression, and the punk rock house show scene mm-hmm. that I was a part of in Portland, Oregon at that time. And yeah, I just kind of started from there. And then, I have always loved films where by the end of the movie, I was like, wow, I've never seen a movie do that before. Like, if anyone's ever seen Ghost Watch or Cannibal Holocaust or, Blair Witch Project or anything James Bell has made, or Trauma, a lot of the trauma films from the late 90s. There's just these movies where it's like, wow, nobody really ever did it like this. Like, this is... And so I had this idea to kind of make the story meta in a way, and I started to realize that I maybe was on to something that was something I had never seen before in a film. And so then once that idea kind of collided with the general thesis of my depression meets Gremlins or whatever, I kind of felt like I had enough of a complex idea that this would make a pretty compelling feature. And so then I kind of got to work.
So when you came up with the meta idea, did you sort of start with, the narrative or like the film within a film first? Because I think the film within a film that you have here, it's really fantastic. It's very charming. And
thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I think, well, first came the story of I Need You Dead, and Dude, and the creature, and the punk rockness, and all of that. And then I think what happened was I kind of just, I don't even really, I'm trying to remember. All I remember was when I came up with the idea for us seeing the director who was making the film and him kind of like losing his mind over it, and this idea that, well, okay, let me retrace my steps. Like, I think what really happened was I watched a film by the filmmaker James Bell. It was called Tantrum, and it was very, very compelling. It was shot very lo-fi, zero budget. I mean, beyond zero budget, with amazing gore and practical effects that were very uncanny valley. And it really inspired me because I was really taken aback by how brilliant I thought the film was, and it was clear that it was made for absolutely nothing. And I became kind of convinced that my film, I Need You Dead, needed to have a flavor of what I saw in that movie. And so my question, I think, became, well, how do I get my little squeaky 80s throwback fun little movie to delve into a more lo-fi, depraved, zero budget weirdo thing? And I think from that need and desire to get the film to that place, the idea of having, well, what if we see the director who's making this film and everybody's walking out on him, and so as a result, he loses his budget and he also sort of loses his mind. And so we watched this film we kind of fell in love with become this demented and twisted, strange, almost kind of experimental art piece made by this deranged, loner.
Yeah.
And I think once that all kind of clicked in my head, I was like, oh, this is a much more interesting movie now than it just following, Dude and the Creature, which I thought was a novel and fun, start. But once I had that idea, I was like, now this is something that I'm fired up about. And when I was casting and crewing up for the film, I was really, really excited about the idea, and I was pretty gung-ho. I mean, I quite literally would tell everybody about it. I would say, this is going to be the greatest movie ever made. Like, this is going to be the movie to end all movies. Like, I was I was very, very confident. Yeah, I was like 18 and just kind of on top of the world with this. So
you kind of have to be.
You do. You have to really be, I mean, at one point, somebody thought they could fly and they just probably jumped off the side of a cliff. But, somebody figured out eventually. I'm glad I'm still breathing and not dead from this thing.
Right. So, you serve a lot of different roles. You write, you direct, you produce. Did a love for one specific role kind of come about first, or was it more of like, I love film and I want to make films, so whatever will get me there,
Yeah, I think writing and directing, has always been the number one since I was young. Because it was, at its earliest stage, because I started making little shorts and stuff when I was like 8 years old, and YouTube was brand new, and my dad gave me his home video camera, I, it wasn't even like back then I was thinking like, oh, I'm writing and directing these films. Like, it's just like I made the story, and I also made all the decisions as to how the thing got put together. And so that's technically writing and directing. And so, now as an adult, that's how it is. But, I mean, in actuality, it's kind of just like I love the role of storyteller. And if someone's sitting at a campfire and they're telling a story, they're picking all the words that come out of their mouth, and they're also picking the pace at which they're telling you the story, what words they're going to emphasize, what they're doing with their hands, the environment in which they're telling the story. And so, that is in itself like direction and writing. So, that's what I would say. I've been forced to direct, I've been forced to edit out of necessity. I've been forced to produce out of necessity, and have kind of made a little bit of a trade of it for myself because I happen to be a very logistical person. But, storytelling is what's really important to me.
Yeah. How did the production of I Need You Dead how did that kind of begin? How were you able to move from, a bunch of ideas or a script into, making the movie? And what was kind of the moment where you realized, like, we're doing this,
Well, it was like the big moment of inspiration where it was like, okay, let's go make this movie for real. Was, I think, the first time I worked in New York on a film was for Lloyd Kaufman, and he was doing a parody of Shakespeare's The Tempest, and I worked on it as a grip. In the grip and electric department, and I didn't even know what a grip was at that time. I had to Google it when they told me what my job was. And, being on that set and seeing everybody work and seeing all the different department heads in action, and it was very eye-opening. And it was like, oh, okay, like, so this is how a movie is made, in a low-budget sense, because, of course, it's a trauma film. And, I think that generally made everything. It made a path forward appear. It was like, oh, I just got to get somebody who can shoot and somebody who can do the wardrobe and somebody who can do this stuff, and then you can make a movie. So I went home back to Portland, and we did some underground punk rock kind of fundraisers with bands and to raise money, and I was an assistant manager at Burger King making money there. And eventually we saved up enough, and I kind of put out a call on social being like, anybody out there good with cameras? Anybody out there like making costumes? And then, a lot of these people were my friends, and we got together, and with the money that we had saved up, we were able to kind of go out and shoot this thing. But I think the firing gun really was once I landed back in Portland after kind of getting this education on this trauma set. I dropped out of film school a couple of years before that, and I always refer to that time on Lloyd Kaufman's set. That was very much my film school.
Yeah. So, and, I think you can kind of tell, you talked a little bit about, fundraising with punk shows and things like that. I think you could tell from watching the movies that, punk and sort of this culture is really important to you. But I think you strike a nice balance between, portraying that culture while also kind of having some fun with it and maybe poking a little bit of fun at it at times. Was that a difficult balance for you to strike?
Yeah, I mean, no, actually, I would say it was quite easy, actually, because that was just my life at the time. Like, the opening of the film where dude is at the house show in the basement, like that house was an actual house show venue that people played at. All the people in that scene were actual punks who went to actual house shows. That band that's playing in the basement, they're an actual band that played house shows and that I actually went and saw all the time when I was younger and asked them if they would be in the film and write a song for the film. The cops would bust out parties, and I would do weird psychedelic drugs and find myself, looking at a hamburger for an hour. Like, these were all just things that happened to me. So it was quite easy and quite intuitive to just kind of pull from my own experiences as being in my late teens and just kind of being a wild kid wearing sunglasses at night, and to make it into something like that. And the satire of it, I mean, it's just inherently a goofy lifestyle, a goofy time, I think, in all of our lives, that kind of, 17 to 19 kind of era.
Yeah.
So
if you had to define your style by distilling it into like a single word or two, how do you think you would do that?
Oh boy, I would have used to say like anti or something. I used to be obsessed with the idea of making anti films, which I don't think I even understood what that meant. But I think, I guess I would just say rebellious is and when I say rebellious, I don't mean against like, the government or authority or, the classic things you would think about.
Yeah.
The word rebellious. But I mean rebellious against the medium of film itself. As in to challenge the idea of what a film can actually be, and I think with I Need You Dead, I like to think that I succeeded in some regard in rebelling against what can be done in a film. And I think that, having the boom mic drop into the shot and having a character's audio cut out abruptly because it actually has to do with the story, the narrative itself. To me, I have yet to see a film that has done that since I watched it or since before I watched it. And so those are the parts of the film that I take great pride in.
Yeah.
Even though, to me, the idea that people would be in the theater and maybe look to each other and say, is something wrong with this movie? The sound is all screwed up now. And then later they would realize, oh, wait a minute, no, it's actually a part of the film. That I really get off on that. So I think that's the rebellious. Rebellious would be the word, and I do want to preface or contrast that though with I do think while those are my proud moments, there's a whole lot of I think is, I'm sorry I can't swear, but
That's
there's a whole
okay. I
lot
guess
of
that's right.
crap. There's a whole lot of crap in I Need You Dead that I think is really poorly done, and I would totally do differently now. Primarily around just the way that the dude's story kind of spirals out of control into some of the cop stuff, the way that he gets crossed with the cops, like I just feel like was kind of poorly done and was poor screenwriting. But
you know, those are lessons that you end up learning just kind of through the process.
Yeah.
You kind of got to go through it to grow. You know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I know you maybe can't go into a ton of detail, but I am very interested in your upcoming film Flapjacks. Very excited, looking forward to when I can see that. Can you at least tell us in what ways is it kind of a step forward for you as a writer, as a filmmaker?
Yeah, well, Flapjacks is a much bigger production than I Need You Dead was. I Need You Dead was made for about $20,000, and Flapjacks is going to be somewhere closer to about $300,000. So it's a big jump for little old me, and trying to keep it together. We've been shooting this movie for what seems like my entire life, but we are going to finish it. We're going to finish shooting this March. And the goal is that it will come out this year in the festivals. So we've luckily partnered up with a good company, and it's seeming like it's going to happen. So in terms of career and scale, it's definitely a step forward for me. And then in terms of creatively, I Need You Dead was such a middle finger to the audience. It was such a rebellious little movie that I wanted to challenge myself and be like, all right, well, yeah, you can go make a punk rock movie that's challenges the audience, sure, but what can you make a movie that the audience actually freaking likes? Like, can you make a movie that the audience sits down, they smile, they connect with the characters, they find it funny and entertaining? And frankly, when I asked myself that question, I was like, I honestly don't know. Maybe I can't do that. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, well, challenge accepted. So Flapjacks, in many ways, I'm trying to kind of make a pop song movie that I think people can sing along to, and that everybody could kind of enjoy. You could bring your mother, your father, and your brother and your sister to come and see, and y'all have a good time at the movies. But it's of course, it's still me. So it's still horror. It's still challenging. There's still way too many plot lines to count on one hand. But I think it's a fairly I think it'll be a fairly compelling picture, and I think it's a script that me and my co-writer Esteban Munoz really killed ourselves over. And we've shot in Japan. It's a global story. So I think people are going to like it. I think it's going to be I think it's going to do all right.
I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait to see it.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely. I got one more question for you before we're out here. Would you rather have to defeat the creature from I Need You Dead or the Flapjacks from Flapjacks?
That's funny. Which is like the opponent I feel more confident against?
Yeah, their physical manifestations. Yeah.
Sure. That's a very funny question. Yeah, well, the Flapjacks, that's more, the Flapjacks is more the beckoning call of kind of like addiction, and the kind of like highs, and like a high, and then the consequences of those highs. And then the creature is more like depression and your inner voice that tells you everything is going to go wrong. I honestly think the Flapjacks is a little bit less of a scary notion to me. I think the creature and its existentialism is much more scary, and I think I still have that little creature in my head every now and then grasping at the controls.
Yeah.
So I think the Flapjacks is probably the easier opponent, but per se the creature is the much more important opponent to defeat. So I don't know, maybe I'd do a little Rocky training montage and go after the creature after all.
All right. I like that answer. All right. That should do it. Rocko Zevenbergen, thank you again so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much to Rocko Zevenbergen for joining us on this episode of Writer's Bullpen. If you're interested in checking out his film, I Need You Dead, it's currently streaming on Amazon Prime Video and on Tubi. Also, keep an ear out for his upcoming film, Flapjacks, which should be wrapping production within the next couple of months. Definitely going to be checking that out once it comes out. And finally, big thank you to all of you for listening to the show. If you're interested in hearing more of this show, you can listen right here on WRHU 88.7 FM or on my personal YouTube channel. It's Christian Pensa, CHRISTIAN space PENSA. I've been your host, Christian Pensa. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, you stay safe out there.